I am just still missing that Marvel magic. I watched Shang-Chi opening weekend, but I didn't watch Loki, and it took me forever to watch Loki, and I actually liked Loki a lot more than Shang-Chi, but budget of $150 to $200 million, current box office as the time I wrote this was $388 million. Obviously a big portion of that can be chalked up to COVID, but this is still a bit of a disappointment. The box office doesn't reflect the quality of this movie though. Shang-Chi is a great addition to the MCU. If you know anything about the origins of this character, you'll be glad to see that Shang-Chi is not only modernized, but retconned in a way that quickly does away with the racist aspects of this character. Shang-Chi is as advertised. What starts off as a pretty down-to-earth Marvel film asks you to swallow some pretty high stakes towards the end, which I'll get into a little bit later. Simu Liu is joined by Awkwafina in what is a coming-home journey for the titular character. Shang-Chi and his sister Xialing must return home to deal with the curious mental state of their father, who is the leader of the Ten Rings. The organization itself isn't quite brought full circle from where it stood during the first Iron Man film, but there is enough, especially with the return of Trevor Slattery for a strong supporting role. The Mandarin we envisioned in the comics doesn't quite appear here. We get someone entirely new with Shang-Chi's father. This is probably to the dismay of true hardcore comic fans, but for anyone invested in the MCU, you'll likely appreciate how well this character fits. Shang-Chi hits on all the right points. Amazing martial arts choreography, a sprinkling of other MCU connections, a majority Asian cast, an influenced but explorative Asian culture throughout the entirety of the film. Until Spider-Man drops, this is likely the most watchable Marvel product to drop this year. Shang-Chi will charm you with wholesome comedy between Sean and Katie while slowly building an intersecting and interweaving plot between the two. This clearly draws them closer and creates tense moments of Sean being a talented martial artist attempting to save her and Katie being somewhat of a damsel in distress with the secondary job of being comedic relief. Everything seems to be going well and approaching the halfway point of the movie until you find out the entire family and Katie sitting down at dinner having a meal very casually. The MCU writers then appear to make a mistake that is plaguing Hollywood, thinking that shades of gray is always more interesting for a character. Wenwu has brought his children home in the most violent manner, only to calmly tell them his plan to save their mother. What you don't get is your typical black and white villain, but a character who is in your shades of gray. You're supposed to feel sympathy for the loss of his wife and the fact that he is now hearing her voice, and it's causing him to pursue this quest. Even if he's wrong, you can relate with him to some extent. Fast forward to the end of the film, Wenwu is dying while handing the rings to Shang-Chi, apparently redeeming him even though his soul is literally devoured and he's caused quite the mess that's gotten dozens of other souls devoured and potentially doomed the entire world. The problem with this is that the direction of the movie changes abruptly. It wants you to handle not really having a centric movie villain until the end of the film, and what you're given is supposed to be an insanely high-stakes fate of the universe kind of battle. In terms of the CGI and the battle itself, it doesn't disappoint, but it does feel a little off. Allow me to compare this movie to Black Panther for a second. In the final battle scene of Black Panther, the stakes aren't universal or even earth-shattering, or ultimately within the confines of Wakanda, and it delivers an impactful story while eliciting a powerful response from the viewer. In Shang-Chi, you have the opposite and not so much time to get your head all around it. All of a sudden, as if in disregard to the past films, there is this universal level threat that is behind a barrier that looks like it could be one-punched by the Hulk. The movie, I think, asks too much for you to be emotionally invested in the final battle in Ta Lao for a location and characters you just discovered. It's this mixture of how they wanted to write Wenwu, the introduction of Ta Lao, and the reveal to the big bad where this movie kind of falls short. All of these things are connected to how the final act of the movie really comes together. I felt myself in less of awe on what was happening and more of thinking to myself that it could have been better. Now don't get me wrong, I'm being extremely nitpicky here. Shang-Chi is its own film and doesn't deserve the comparison to Black Panther. Marvel basically revived a pretty dead character in terms of the comics and didn't have much source material to work with that would have made sense with the current status of the MCU. I'd give this movie an 8 out of 10. It's well done, but holding Marvel to such high standards, I did expect a little more. The biggest question I really had was, where does Shang-Chi fit into the MCU? Is he going to be an Avenger? Is he a hero? Does he save the world now? Is he on the magic, mystic, defense side of things with Doctor Strange? I understand that all the questions can't be answered right now, and that this was more of an introduction to the character, but what direction are we going? Is Shang-Chi 2 going to be about him taking down his sister because she runs the 10 rings right now, or is that something to be left in the dust similar to Mordo from Doctor Strange? Only time will tell. Thanks for joining me on Black Man's Law.